The year is 2008. The US elected a new president. It was the International Year of the Potato, and coincidentally, it was also the year of Rockstar's next big hit, which was GTA 4. Today is the game's 10th birthday, and to celebrate that, I will take a look at the game and we will find out how well this game aged and whether it's still worth playing today. The first things you might have noticed when this game was new were the heavily improved graphics and audio of the game, not only when you compare them to previous titles of the series, but also compared to many other games that were released around that time. Whether or not you found GTA 4 to be aesthetically pleasing, you have to admit that from a pure technical point of view, the graphics were on point for the time. GTA 4 features a large number of dynamic and quite sharp looking reflections, dynamic lights and shadows, thousands of high detailed meshes all throughout the game and beautiful vehicles. I mean, just admire this beauty, standing in the middle of Star Junction for a while. The textures used in the game are pretty at many places, but occasionally you can still come across really ugly and blurry ones. But to be fair, these can usually be found at places that are either not important at all or are pure Easter eggs, or at those that are not really meant to be seen, for example vehicle interiors. A prime example of this can be seen when you take the subway train. The textures in there look horrible from every angle, but then again, who would take the train when you have a huge selection of vehicles waiting for you? I mean, just get into one and start driving around and run over some pedestrians or drive nicely because, I guess, well, that's what people do in GTA. But talking about pedestrians, there seem to be quite a few different ones, which was a cool and new thing back then. I mean, it sure doesn't add a whole lot to the gameplay, but it still makes the streets look more interesting when they're not constantly roamed by the same three paths. Well, however, let's take a closer look at some of the pedestrians, because in my opinion, they look great in this game. Not only the models, but also the textures and details and the way different types of NPCs interact with objects and each other. You can occasionally see some of them smoking a cigarette or enjoying a drink or talking on their phone. However, not everything is beautiful in Liberty City. One thing that you might notice after playing it for a while is that usually everything looks a bit greenish or grey and washed out in some places, especially parks. Even though the developers added a saturation setting to the game, I still think that things look off from time to time. It's either all greyish or way too colorful, which makes it look weird again. Another thing that's not very nice is the lack of vegetation around the city. However, if you hit a tree with your car, you can sometimes see leaves falling out of it, which is a neat little detail they added. Another thing I don't like are the weather effects, especially the thunderstorm. This effect just looks bad and has some of the loudest sound effects known to mankind. However, I kinda like the cloudy and super sunny settings, as they are called in the game, because they seem to make everything look much nicer and less washed out. But apart from these points, I think the game looks great. It certainly doesn't feel like a 10-year-old game to me. The rendering distance is high enough, the textures are good and the meshes look great. Interesting NPCs and small details add to the urban atmosphere, and the occasional particle effect paired with the sound of a misfiring engine prove that the developers tried to add as many details to the game as they could. Talking about details and sound effects, GTA 4 is pure gaming ASMR when it comes to the sounds. Just listen to these sound effects of a tire going over different types of tarmac. But not only that, usually you don't have the time to listen to these sound effects, because most of the time you will listen to the radio stations in Liberty City, of which there are 19 stations with over 200 different songs playing in either a loop or random order.
The meaning of all this, the posters on the wall and the pictures in the wallets. Call us, why the hell you don't call it?
Occasionally the radio DJs will refer to your actions as you proceed in the game. When you examine the sound effects used in the game, you can find several details that make GTA 4 feel more realistic. For example, getting out of a car with its engine on will not stop the radio from playing. Also, receiving phone calls or getting out of a tunnel sometimes will interfere with the radio signal. But not only that, in all the cutscenes of the game, the voice acting is on spot. There are absolutely no awkward silent moments in any of the game's dialogues, and the voice actors really help selling the story.
Hey, Nico! Glad you could make it.
Yes. You got the money?
Sure. But I just wanted to say how grateful me and my bosses are for what you did.
Now let me talk about one of the most important aspects in a driving related game, the vehicles. You can select from typical vehicles like 2- and 4-door cars, muscle cars, SUVs and motorcycles. But you can also choose to travel around in boats and helicopters. Unfortunately, that's it. No planes, no submarines, no bicycles and no UFOs. However, you can still take the train, but seriously, who the hell ever thought, oh, it's such a nice day to start up GTA 4 and take a drive in Liberty City's subway train. The available cars come in different colors, even if there are not a whole lot of them available. Unfortunately, you cannot choose the color of your car. If it gets repaired in a pay and spray, you get a random color. Furthermore, you cannot customize your vehicles in any other way, because unlike in previous GTA games, there are no tuning options available in GTA 4. Even though many cars feel good to drive, in my opinion, some just feel like a horrible bathtub filled with concrete on wheels. And I think this might be what made many people dislike GTA 4. I mean, let's admit it, some vehicles just feel bad to drive. However, I love the way other certain vehicles behave. Overall, the game doesn't feel too much like an arcade racer, which fits the more realistic setting of the game. And that's what I would call a very good thing, because even though I hate some vehicles, I then again don't care at all for others, while I simply love the way that some certain vehicles behave. And that variety in behavior adds so much to the game, because almost every single car and bike feels unique, thus creating a different experience each time you drive from point A to point B. And while we talk about vehicle behavior, let's look at something related, for example the ragdoll physics. It has never felt so real to run people over, I guess. Not that I really know how it feels in real life. But however, when I think back to GTA San Andreas, I can remember how sometimes running people over either just put them on the ground or flipped your car over or just stopped you completely, resulting in the NPC just tipping over. But in GTA 4, each time you hit something, it feels completely unique, because it doesn't use animations when you run somebody over. Instead, it computes every impact and the forces involved from scratch for every new situation. It's almost not worth avoiding pedestrians, because every time you hit them, you get a new experience. The same applies to smaller objects and decorations placed around the map, like benches and fences. They also break dynamically. Another impressive improvement compared to previous games is the more realistic and much more detailed vehicle damage model. This is, again, totally dynamic and feels different for every car and crash. And how could I forget the countless times where I tried to hit people or small objects with the rotor of a helicopter, which will result in the object or pad flying through the air like a frisbee. Oh, you can also mess around with fire engines and have some fun with water jets. But enough of the technical details, let's finally take a look at the most important thing of a game, the gameplay. GTA 4 offers the pretty typical story mode that comes with every GTA, but this was the first game of the series that offered an official multiplayer, which I will talk about in a second. For now, let's get back to the story mode, which featured around 70 missions to play through and the very well written and told story of Nico Bellic, who came to the US to deal with his past, only to find himself in even more trouble the more he tries to fix things. Even though the story is interesting in my opinion, many missions feel quite the same. Usually a mission involves driving to a destination, shooting things up and then escaping the police. But not every single mission is like that. Sometimes you have to climb up somewhere, some missions require prep work to be done, and in some you just have to fight loads and loads of police officers to get away. What I really like though is the fact that sometimes you have the ability to choose how you want to finish a job, even though most of the time it doesn't change the outcome of the story. But usually it's something like this. You can either shoot the entire place up if you want to, or you just try to silently get what you are looking for without drawing all the attention on you. Not only that, but in my opinion the story featured a lot of memorable characters that I really started liking somehow. Besides the story missions, you can choose from several free time activities like bowling, darts, 8-ball, drinking, Cube 3D, the theater, strip club, and some more. However, there are not a lot of activities and many of them are kinda lame. I stated before that there are no tuning options. Luckily, you can customize your character at least a little bit by getting new clothes. However, this is a very limited tool as there are only some items you can buy in the enterable stores. Other than stores, there are some buildings you can enter and take a look around. For example, sex shops, subway stations, internet cafes, and residential buildings. Even though most of them look the same, it's still nice Rockstar included them, because sometimes they are a good way of getting to the top of a building for whatever reason. Another important thing to consider in a game like this is the gunplay. There are only a handful of different guns available, 2 per category to be more precise. However, I wouldn't really say that it makes a huge difference which of those you choose. Both rifles kinda feel the same and so do both pistols. Weapons can be bought in underground weapon stores, which are quite rare. Unfortunately, there are also no customization options available here either, but besides that, the weapons actually feel good to use. On the console versions of the game, all the aiming is usually done by the game itself, so you only need to hold down the aim button, then you can select the target. However, manual aim was always an option. The auto aiming works very well and usually the right targets are selected. When you play the game on a PC with a keyboard and a mouse, you have to use the manual aim, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it gives you more control. However, auto aiming is available when you use a supported controller. Now let me talk about the map. It was heavily inspired by NYC and New Jersey and it consists of 6 boroughs, which are Broker, Dukes, Bohan, Algonquin, Happiness Island and Albany. And even though I really like the urban, suburban and industrial look of the game, I have to admit that the map is not really diverse, because there are, for example, no woods or mountains or any other areas like that. The only thing you get is a city. Besides that, I still think that it looks very interesting and authentic almost everywhere, and I still enjoy looking around and exploring the city. I think it's neat that they added a lot of the real landmarks and sites from NYC to the game and added a funny twist to some of them. The game still looks marvelous, even after 10 years have passed. I mean, just look at these nice panoramic shots taken all around the city. If you are really into the game, you can try to find all the collectibles, of which there are quite a few in GTA 4. For example, there are 50 stunt jumps, 200 fucking pigeons that you need to shoot, 20 police missions, 30 cars to steal, assassination missions, drug deliveries, races and much more. When you've finished all of that, there are still some side quests to complete, even though most of them only require you to drive to a specific location. Some of them tell a short story on their own or add tiny details to the main story. Unfortunately, there's no really bizarre stuff or side quests going on, so no dragons, talking dogs, UFOs or anything like that. The only kinda bizarre Easter egg you get is the beating heart inside of the Statue of Happiness. Now we come to the multiplayer.
Whoop-de-doo!
Like I said before, this was the first official online multiplayer for a GTA game. And it was, well, let's say very simple, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Though in this case it kinda was. It's a quite classic multiplayer where you choose a game mode and then either enter a public lobby or you host your own lobby. Before you could do that, you needed to create an online character. And by that I mean you had to choose from some predefined templates which almost looked the same. However, you could choose the clothes, but that was it. By earning XP in the multiplayer, you could unlock more outfits to choose from. However, there was a huge selection of races and maps for deathmatches and all the variations of these 2 game modes. I mean, look at this list of racetracks. But let's get back to the free roaming for a second. This was very limited, but much more pleasant to play than GTA 5's mode, if you ask me. Back then, nobody had own cars, apartments, and you couldn't spend your money on anything. It was all about the fun and games. And it was something special when you found a cool car at a random spot and it was great to show it to your friends in the lobby. Even public lobbies seemed to be much more friendly back then. I have absolutely no idea who came up with it, but fights always only seemed to happen at the airport. For whatever reason, this was an unwritten rule that almost everybody followed back then. You never really got shot or ran over outside of the airport and people seemed to be nicer to each other in general. At the end of this review, I quickly want to talk about quirks, bugs and some differences between the PC and the console version of the game. The most famous glitch was the swing glitch. For this glitch, you simply drive to a specific swing located on a playground in the game and you wait for this madness to happen. I cannot tell you how many hours of my life I've wasted with this glitch. When this game was new, it had so many bugs. It didn't only happen once that you fell through the ground for no reason or the textures kept flashing or disappearing. Unfortunately, some of these things still happen today. So let me quickly summarize the most important points. How has this game aged over the course of the last decade? I would say very well. The graphics still look good enough to be enjoyable today. The sound effects and music selection are still enjoyable, but I guess that depends on the type of music you like. The physics might not be something that everybody is going to enjoy, but I personally really did enjoy the more realistic and heavy behavior of cars, pedestrians and other objects, as well as the more realistic optical damage. The story is still worth playing if you haven't done so, but I actually think it's also worth replaying it, as I have done several times. The cutscenes are good, the characters are enjoyable, memorable, and the voice acting is on point.
Is that we'll all be judged in the end. All of your brothers. And you, Patrick. And you, Kate.
Who's gonna judge Kate? What would she win if they did? Virgin of the Year?
Again, overall I think this game can still be enjoyed today, and it's especially worth playing it again if you have fond memories of playing this game when you were younger like I have. So happy anniversary GTA 4 and thanks for watching.